The crystal towers of the Velthian palace gleamed under 3 moons as Princess Elara stood at her balcony window. Down in the courtyard, another potential husband was about to fail her test. She could already see it coming. Prince Vexler was a massive warrior from the Kronar system. His muscles had muscles. His armor was covered in medals from 100 battles. Right now, he was staring at a simple metal puzzle box that Elara had placed on a pedestal. The test was straightforward. Open the box without breaking it. Inside was a token he needed to proceed to the next challenge. The princess watched as Vexler circled the box like it was an enemy combatant. He poked it with one clawed finger. He shook it. Then, predictably, he raised his armored fist and brought it down hard. The box shattered into pieces. The token inside disintegrated into dust. Failure, announced the court official in a bored voice. This was the 17th time he'd said that word in 3 months. Elara sighed and turned away from the window. Her chief advisor, an elderly Velthian named Karan, stood nearby with a data pad displaying the remaining candidates. Perhaps the next one will fare better, Your Highness, Karan said without much hope in his voice. They're all the same, Elara replied, walking across her private chamber. Warriors who only know force. Scientists who overthink everything. Nobles who expect the crown to come with me as a bonus prize. The truth was getting harder to hide. The Velthian Empire needed stability. Elara's father had died 2 years ago, and tradition required she choose a consort before her coronation could be finalized. The council was getting impatient. Some were even whispering about choosing for her. But Elara had designed these tests for a reason. She didn't need the strongest warrior or the smartest scientist. She needed a partner. Someone who could think clearly under pressure. Someone who noticed details. Someone who understood that real problems rarely had simple, forceful solutions. Down in the Grand Hall, workers were already cleaning up the broken puzzle box. Elara watched from an upper gallery as the next suitor was announced. Prince Thorin of the Merchant Clans. He arrived in expensive robes, his entourage carrying gifts of rare metals and exotic fabrics. Thorin approached the new puzzle box, identical to the one Vexler had destroyed, and immediately began calculating. Elara could see his lips moving as he worked through equations. He pulled out a scanning device and examined the box from every angle. Then he tried to hire one of the palace servants to open it for him. Disqualified, the official announced. Elara rubbed her temples. The headache that had been building for weeks was getting worse. That's when she noticed him. In the corner of the Grand Hall, almost invisible among the marble columns, a human was working. He wore the simple gray coveralls of palace maintenance staff. His name badge said Tom Davis. Elara had seen him before, usually fixing things that broke around the palace. The Velthian energy systems weren't compatible with half the imported equipment, so things failed constantly. Tom was currently standing on a ladder, replacing a light panel that had burned out. He worked methodically, testing connections with a small device before securing each wire. When his standard tool didn't fit one of the connectors, Elara watched him study the problem for a moment. Then he pulled out a different tool from his belt, modified it slightly with a quick adjustment and completed the repair. He didn't rush. He didn't force anything. He just looked at the problem, understood it, and solved it. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community. Most people still didn't know what to make of them. They weren't the strongest species or the smartest or the longest lived. They didn't have natural armor or weapons or telepathy. What they did have was an odd talent for adapting to almost anything. They showed up, figured things out, and got to work. Tom climbed down his ladder, packed his tools, and headed toward the exit. He walked right past the latest prince, Sorvok the Wise, who was now attempting to meditate his way into understanding the puzzle box. An idea formed in Elara's mind. It was completely inappropriate. It would scandalize the entire court. Her advisors would think she'd lost her mind. The noble families would protest for months. She didn't care anymore. Elara gathered her robes and walked quickly down the gallery stairs. Her guards hurried to follow her. Karan called after her, asking where she was going, but she ignored him. She entered the grand hall just as Tom reached the main doors. "You," Elara said, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the assembled court. Everything stopped. Tom froze with his hand on the door. He turned around slowly, looking confused. "Me?" he asked, glancing behind him to see if she meant someone else. There was no one behind him. "Yes, you," Elara said clearly. "You will take the consort's trial." The hall erupted in chaos. The grand hall exploded with noise. Nobles shouted in outrage. Advisors rushed forward waving their arms. Guards looked confused about whether they should do something. And Tom just stood there holding his toolbox, completely frozen. "Your Highness, this is madness." Karan pushed through the crowd, his face turning a shade of purple that Alara had never seen before. "He's a maintenance worker. A human. This violates every tradition we have." "Does it?" Alara kept her eyes on Tom. "Show me the law that says I cannot choose him." Karan's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The truth was there was no such law. Velthian tradition stated clearly that the princess could select any candidate for the trials. Any candidate. The assumption had always been that she would choose from the noble families, the warrior clans, or the intellectual elite. Nobody had ever imagined she might choose a janitor. "But he's nobody," sputtered Lord Vexen, one of the High Council members. "No title, no family lineage, no accomplishments." Tom finally found his voice. I have to agree with him, Your Highness. I think there's been some kind of mistake." "There is no mistake," Alara said firmly. She turned to address the entire court. "The law is clear. I have chosen my candidate. The trials will begin at dawn tomorrow. This is an insult to every noble family in the Empire." Another council member stepped forward. "We have sent our finest sons and you choose a common laborer?" "Your finest sons failed," Alara replied coldly. "Every single one of them. Perhaps it's time to try something different." The court dissolved into arguments. Some nobles were already storming out, probably to send urgent messages to their families. Others clustered in groups, whispering furiously. Tom still hadn't moved. He looked like he was hoping the floor would open up and swallow him. Alara walked over to him. Up close, she could see the wear on his coveralls, the calluses on his hands, the genuine panic in his eyes. "I know this seems crazy," she said quietly so only he could hear. "But I've been watching you work. You solve problems. Real problems. That's what I need." "Your Highness, I clean floors and fix broken lights," Tom whispered back. "I don't know anything about being a consort or running an empire or whatever it is you're supposed to do." "Neither did any of the princes," Alara said. "But they all pretended they did. At least you're honest." Before Tom could respond, two royal attendants appeared at his side. They were tall, elegant Velthians who looked at him like he was some kind of bizarre science experiment. "We will prepare the candidate," one of them announced stiffly. "Wait, I didn't agree to this," Tom protested as they began steering him toward a side door. "Velthian law states that no chosen candidate may refuse," Karan said, having regained some of his composure. "To do so would be an insult to the crown. The penalty is exile from Velthian territory." Tom's eyes widened. "So I either take these trials or I lose my job and get kicked off the planet?" "Essentially yes," Karan replied with a slight smile. He was clearly hoping Tom would refuse and solve this embarrassing problem for everyone. Tom looked at Alara. She met his gaze steadily. She was asking a lot from him, she knew that. But something in her gut told her this was right. All those princes with their armor and their degrees and their arrogance, none of them had ever actually looked at her. They'd looked at the crown, the power, the status. Tom was the first person in months who seemed to see her as a person. "Okay," Tom said finally. "I'll do it. But I'm telling you right now, I'm going to fail spectacularly." "We'll see," Alara said. The attendants led Tom away through corridors he'd only seen while carrying cleaning supplies. They brought him to a guest suite that was bigger than the entire apartment he shared with 3 other human workers. The walls were made of some kind of shimmering crystal. The bed looked like it could fit 6 people. There was a bathroom with a tub he could practically swim in. "This is where I'm staying?" Tom asked, dumbfounded. "Until the trials are complete," one attendant replied. "We will return in 1 hour with formal attire and a briefing on protocol." They left him alone. Tom dropped his toolbox and sat on the edge of the massive bed. His hands were shaking slightly. What had he just gotten himself into? A soft chime announced a visitor. The door opened to reveal a small alien he'd never seen before, carrying a tray of food and what looked like data pads. "I am Bree, Junior Palace Historian," the alien said in a high, quick voice. "I've been assigned to educate you about the trials. We have very little time." Tom looked at the pile of data pads. "How much do I need to know?" "Everything on these pads represents the minimum required knowledge," Bree said, setting them down. "Most candidates spend years preparing. You have 12 hours. "Great," Tom muttered. "No pressure." Bree began explaining the history of the trials. They'd been established 300 years ago as a way to ensure the royal consort possessed certain qualities beyond just breeding or politics. Wisdom, compassion, creativity, courage, and sacrifice. Each trial tested one of these virtues. What happens if I fail? Tom asked. You return to your previous position, Bree said. Though I imagine it would be extremely awkward. Tom picked up one of the data pads and started reading. The words were swimming in front of his eyes. He kept thinking about his grandmother back on Earth. She'd raised him after his parents died. Taught him everything he knew about fixing things, about paying attention, about not giving up just because something seemed hard. You know what, Gran? He said quietly to himself. I bet you'd tell me to just do my best and see what happens. Outside his window, the 3 moons of Velthia were rising. Tomorrow he would face trials designed to break princes and warriors. He was just a guy who fixed broken things. But maybe, Tom thought, that was exactly what this empire needed. Tom barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, his brain kept replaying facts from the data pads. Velthian history. Court protocols. The names of important council members. By the time dawn arrived, he felt like his head was stuffed with cotton. The attendants arrived early with formal clothing. It wasn't the heavy armor the warrior princes wore or the elaborate robes the nobles preferred. Instead, they'd given him something simpler. A dark blue tunic with silver threading and practical pants. He looked like a dignified version of himself, which was probably the best anyone could hope for. The first trial begins in 30 minutes, one attendant informed him. You will be escorted to the Maze of Mirrors. Tom's stomach did a flip. He'd read about this trial last night. 17 princes had attempted it. 17 had failed. The maze was enormous, filled with mirrors that reflected and distorted everything. Candidates had to reach the center within 2 hours. Most got lost within the first 20 minutes. The walk to the maze felt like a funeral march. Guards lined the hallways. Nobles watched from balconies, whispering and pointing. Tom caught snippets of their conversations. The human won't last 10 minutes. This is what happens when you let lesser species into the palace. Poor thing. Almost feel sorry for him. Tom clenched his fists and kept walking. He dealt with people looking down on him his whole life. This was nothing new. The maze entrance was a massive archway carved with ancient Velthian symbols. Princess Elara stood beside it with the council members and what looked like half the palace staff. Everyone wanted to watch the human fail. Candidate Tom Davis, the official announced. You will enter the Maze of Mirrors. Reach the center within 2 hours to pass the first trial. The use of technology is forbidden. Violence against the structure results in immediate failure. Do you understand? Yes, Tom said, surprised his voice came out steady. Elara caught his eye. She gave him the smallest nod. Not pity. Not encouragement exactly. Just acknowledgement. You've got this. Or maybe you don't. But try anyway. Tom stepped through the archway. The maze was worse than he'd imagined. Mirrors everywhere, floor to ceiling, reflecting his image 1,000 times. Every direction looked the same. The lighting was strange, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Within seconds he'd lost sight of the entrance. He took a deep breath. Okay, think. Don't panic. Tom remembered something his grandmother used to say when he'd get frustrated with a broken appliance. Stop looking at what you think you see. Look at what's actually there. He closed his eyes. Cut out the visual noise. What else could he use? The air. Tom felt a slight breeze on his left cheek. Air had to flow through the maze somehow. Ventilation. Which meant the passages weren't all dead ends. Air would move toward open spaces, away from blocked ones. He opened his eyes and moved left, following the air current. His reflection multiplied around him, but he ignored it. Every few steps, he'd stop and feel for the breeze again. Adjust his direction. The mirrors tried to confuse him. Some reflected other paths that didn't exist. Some showed him walking in circles. But Tom had spent years in maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts. He knew how buildings worked, how air moved, how spaces connected. 15 minutes in he found the first marker. A small crystal embedded in the floor, glowing softly. The data pad had mentioned these. They indicated you were on the right path. Tom kept going. The maze seemed to shift and change, but he realized it was just his perception playing tricks. The actual structure was fixed. He started noticing other details. Tiny scratches on certain mirrors where previous candidates had touched them. Slight variations in the mirror angles. The temperature, warmer in dead ends where air didn't circulate, cooler in through passages. He wasn't rushing. Every prince had rushed, trying to power through with speed and strength. Tom moved methodically, paying attention, making small adjustments. 30 minutes in he found the second marker. Outside the maze, the crowd was getting restless. Nobles checked their timepieces. Karan looked disappointed that Tom hadn't given up yet. "He's taking too long," someone muttered. "He'll never make it." Elara said nothing. She was watching the entrance intently, her hands clasped behind her back. Inside, Tom reached a section where the mirrors formed a spiral pattern. This was the part that had broken most candidates. The reflections created an optical illusion that made you feel like you were falling. Prince Vexler had panicked here and started smashing mirrors. 3 others had gotten so disoriented they'd collapsed. Tom felt the vertigo hit him. His balance shifted. The world seemed to tilt. He sat down on the floor. Just sat there, cross-legged, and closed his eyes again. Waited for his inner ear to recalibrate. The dizziness was just sensory input. It wasn't real. His grandmother had taken him on a boat once when he was 7. He'd gotten seasick until she taught him to focus on the horizon, on something stable. He couldn't see a horizon here, but he could feel the solid floor beneath him. He focused on that. On gravity. On what was actually real versus what his confused senses were telling him. After a minute, the spinning sensation faded. Tom opened his eyes, stood up, and kept walking. He didn't look at the mirrors anymore. Just at the floor, following the air current and the occasional markers. 45 minutes. 3rd marker. The center of the maze was a circular chamber with a pedestal. On the pedestal sat a simple crystal sphere. Tom picked it up. The moment he did, the mirrors around him became transparent. He could see out to where the crowd waited. They were all staring. Silent. Tom walked back through the now clear maze, holding the sphere. When he emerged from the entrance, exactly 52 minutes had elapsed. Less than an hour. Faster than any candidate in the maze's history. The official looked at his timepiece, then at Tom, then back at the timepiece like it might be broken. "The candidate has passed the first trial," he announced, sounding shocked. A murmur ran through the crowd. Elara allowed herself a small smile. Tom stood there, breathing hard, sweat on his forehead. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. But there were 4 more trials to go. Karan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Impressive, human. But the next trial has broken stronger candidates than you. The chamber of voices awaits. You have 1 hour to rest." Tom nodded. His legs felt like jelly, but he'd take whatever rest he could get. As attendants led him to a recovery room, he passed Princess Elara. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Curiosity maybe. Or something else. "Well done," she said quietly. "1 down," Tom replied. 4 to go. 4 to go, Elara agreed. And for the first time since this whole crazy situation started, Tom thought maybe, just maybe, he had a chance. The hour of rest went by too quickly. Tom barely had time to drink some water and catch his breath before the attendants returned. The court had reassembled, but the mood had changed. People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching him carefully, like he'd transformed from a joke into something that might actually be dangerous to their expectations. The Chamber of Voices was in a different wing of the palace. As they walked, Bree appeared beside Tom, speaking quickly. "This trial breaks most candidates mentally," the small historian whispered. "The chamber will be filled with holographic projections. All of them will claim to need help desperately. Only one actually needs assistance. Choose wrong and you fail. Try to help everyone and you'll exhaust yourself before finding the real one. Help no one and you fail for lack of compassion." "How do I know which one is real?" Tom asked. "That's the test," Bree said, then disappeared into the crowd. The Chamber of Voices was a large circular room with white walls. As soon as Tom stepped inside, the holograms activated. Suddenly he was surrounded by dozens of people. Aliens of every species he'd seen in the palace and some he hadn't. They all started talking at once. "Please, my child is sick, I need medicine. Help me, I've been robbed, I have nothing left. My transport crashed, I'm stranded, please help. I'm lost, I can't find my family." The voices crashed over Tom like a wave. His first instinct was to panic, to try helping everyone at once. That's what a good person would do, right? But the trial wasn't about being good. It was about being wise. About seeing clearly when everything was designed to confuse you. Tom took a deep breath and stood still. He let the voices wash over him without reacting. His grandmother had worked in customer service for 30 years. She taught him something important. People who genuinely need help act different from people who are performing distress. He started watching instead of listening. Really watching. Most of the holograms were theatrical. Big gestures. Loud voices. They were trying too hard to get his attention. Their stories were dramatic but vague. No specific details. Just emotional appeals designed to pull at his heartstrings. Tom walked slowly through the crowd, looking at faces. Eye contact. That was another thing his grandmother taught him. People in real distress make eye contact differently. They're searching for genuine connection, not just attention. Then he saw her. A small holographic child sitting in the corner, away from the chaos. She wasn't yelling or waving her arms. She was just sitting there looking around with frightened eyes. Every few seconds she'd stand up, walk a few steps in one direction, then stop and turn around. The behavior of someone genuinely lost, not someone performing being lost. Tom approached her carefully. As he got closer, the other holograms got louder, more demanding, trying to pull his attention back. He ignored them. "Hey," Tom said gently, kneeling down to the child's level. "Are you okay?" The child looked at him. Really looked at him. Her eyes filled with tears. "I can't find my mom. We were in the market and there were so many people and I turned around and she was gone." The other holograms were shouting now, but Tom focused on the child. "What's your mom's name?" "Keela," the child said. "She has blue markings on her arms and she was wearing a green coat." Specific details. Real memory. This was the one. "Okay," Tom said. "Let's find her together." The moment he took the child's hand, the other holograms vanished. The room went silent. A door opened on the far wall, and a real Velthian woman rushed through, crying. The child ran to her. "Thank you," the woman said to Tom, her voice shaking. "Thank you for seeing her." They disappeared, and Tom was left alone in the chamber. The door behind him opened. The official stood there looking grudgingly impressed. "The candidate has passed the second trial." The third trial was different. Tom was led to a workshop filled with broken equipment, scrap metal, discarded parts, and random materials. A pile of junk, basically. "You have 2 hours," the official announced. "Create something beautiful." Then they left him alone. Tom walked around the pile, examining what he had to work with. This was familiar territory. He'd grown up fixing broken things, making new things from old parts. His first toy as a kid had been something he'd built himself from spare parts in his grandmother's garage. The princes had tried to build impressive things. Weapons. Monuments. Complex machines meant to show off their intelligence. But the trial didn't ask for impressive. It asked for beautiful. Tom thought about what beauty meant. It wasn't about size or complexity. It was about feeling. About creating something that touched people emotionally. He started sorting through the materials. Found gears of different sizes. Thin metal sheets that could be shaped. Springs. Wire. A cracked crystal that still caught the light in interesting ways. His hands moved almost automatically. This was the part of himself he trusted most. Not his book knowledge or his social skills. Just his ability to see how things fit together, how they could work in harmony. An hour passed. Then 90 minutes. Tom's hands were covered in grease and small cuts, but he kept working. Adjusting. Fine-tuning. When the door opened and the officials entered, Tom stepped back from his creation. He built a music box. Not fancy or elaborate. Just a simple mechanical device with a cylinder of carefully placed pins that would pluck metal tines as it rotated. The gears he'd salvaged would make it turn slowly when wound. The cracked crystal he'd positioned to catch the light and scatter it as the box played. "Demonstrate," the chief official said skeptically. Tom wound the small crank. The gears engaged. Slowly, carefully, a melody began to play. Simple notes, nothing complex but clear and pure. As it played, the light through the crystal created patterns on the walls. Moving colors that danced with the music. The officials stood in silence. One of them, an elderly Velthian woman, had tears in her eyes. "My mother used to play a music box like this," she whispered. "When I was young before the war." The beauty wasn't in the object itself. It was in what it made people feel. Memory. Peace. Connection to something gentle in a universe that often wasn't. "The candidate has passed the third trial," the chief official said quietly. Tom was exhausted. 3 trials in one day. But there was no time to rest. The fourth trial was already prepared. The test of courage. They brought him to a simulation chamber. Dark walls embedded with technology he couldn't identify. "You will face your deepest fear," the official explained. "The simulation will draw from your subconscious and create a scenario designed to break you. Previous candidates have faced monsters, death scenarios, and their worst nightmares. Overcome your fear to pass." The door sealed behind Tom. The room went completely dark. Then the simulation began. Tom wasn't facing a monster or a death scenario. Instead, he was standing in his grandmother's house back on Earth. But it was empty. Cold. The furniture was covered in dust sheets. A for sale sign stood in the yard. His phone started ringing. He answered. "Tom?" It was his grandmother's voice, but distant. Disappointed. Tom, why did you leave? Why did you go so far away? I needed you and you weren't here. Gran. You were never enough, other voices joined in. His old teachers, former co-workers, friends who drifted away. Never smart enough, never strong enough, never special. Why did you think you could be anything more than what you are? The simulation showed him failing at everything, losing his job, being sent back to Earth in disgrace. His grandmother looking at him with disappointment until the day she died. Alone. Because he'd chased something impossible and abandoned what mattered. This was his real fear. Not death. Not pain. But inadequacy. Being fundamentally not enough and hurting people because of it. Previous candidates had fought their fears. Denied them. Run from them. Tom did something different. He sat down on his grandmother's simulated couch and looked at the phantom of her standing in the doorway. You're right, he said. I'm not enough. I never will be. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to let people down sometimes. I'm going to fail at things. The simulation flickered, uncertain. But that's okay, Tom continued. Being not enough is what makes me try harder. It's what makes me keep learning, keep growing, keep asking for help when I need it. If I was already perfect, I wouldn't need to become anything better. He stood up and faced all the phantom voices. I can't guarantee I'll never fail or never hurt anyone. But I can guarantee I'll never stop trying to do better. That's all any of us can do. The simulation dissolved. The lights came back on. Tom was alone in the empty chamber, his heart pounding but his hands steady. The door opened. Princess Elara stood there herself this time, not the officials. 4 trials, she said. 4 passes. No candidate has ever done this. Tom wiped sweat from his forehead. How many more? 1, Elara said. But it's the hardest of all. The palace had gone silent. Word had spread through every corridor, every chamber, every corner of the empire. The human janitor had passed 4 trials. 4 trials that had broken princes, warriors, and scholars. Now everyone waited to see what would happen with the 5th. Tom was brought to a private chamber he'd never seen before. No guards. No officials. No crowds watching from balconies. Just a simple room with soft lighting and 2 chairs facing each other. Princess Elara was already there, standing by the window. She'd changed from her formal robes into something simpler. She looked tired. Human, almost, despite being very much not human. Sit, she said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Tom sat. His legs were shaking from exhaustion. 4 trials in one day had drained everything he had. But he forced himself to stay alert. This was the final test. Whatever it was, he had to be ready. Elara sat across from him. For a long moment she just looked at him, studying him. Then she leaned back and spoke. The 5th trial is different from the others, she said. No maze. No puzzles. No simulations. Just a question. What's the question? Tom asked. Tell me why you should fail. Tom blinked. What? Tell me why you should fail this trial. Why you should not become my consort. Why you are the wrong choice. Elara's expression was unreadable. 17 princes sat in that chair before you. Every single one of them refused to answer. They listed their accomplishments, their worthiness, their noble blood and great deeds. Every single one failed this trial. Tom felt his stomach drop. This was a trap. It had to be. If he listed his flaws, she'd use them as reasons to reject him. If he didn't, he'd fail like the others. There was no right answer. Except maybe there was. Tom thought about his grandmother again. She'd always hated false modesty, but she'd also hated arrogance. Know what you're good at, she'd say, but never pretend you're good at everything. That's when you stop learning. Okay, Tom said. You want the truth? I should fail because I'm nobody special, Your Highness. I'm not a prince. I'm not a warrior. I can't command armies or negotiate trade agreements or do whatever else royal consorts are supposed to do. He took a breath and continued. I don't know your political system. I'll mess up formal dinners because I won't know which fork to use or how to bow to the right people at the right depth. I'll probably accidentally insult some important ambassador because I don't understand the cultural context of something I say. Elara listened without interrupting. I'm going to make mistakes, Tom went on. Big ones probably. People are going to look at you and wonder what you were thinking, choosing some human maintenance worker. They're going to question your judgment. Some of them might even lose respect for you because of me. He looked down at his hands. Still dirty from the 3rd trial. Still calloused from years of manual labor. I can't give you what a prince could give you. Political alliances. Military strength. Ancient bloodlines. I'm just a guy who's good at fixing broken things and tries to be decent to people. That's all I've got." The silence stretched out. Tom wondered if he'd just ended whatever slim chance he had. But the question had been asked and he'd answered honestly. Finally, Elara spoke. "And why should you succeed?" Tom looked up, surprised. "What? You've told me why you should fail. Now tell me why you should succeed." Tom thought carefully. This felt like the real question. The one that mattered. "For the same reasons," he said slowly. "I should succeed because I know I'm nobody special. Which means I'll actually listen when people give me advice. I'll ask questions instead of pretending I already know everything. I'll learn because I understand how much I don't know." He met her eyes. "I should succeed because I'll see you as a person, not as a crown. I'll notice when you're tired or frustrated or lonely, because I've spent my whole life paying attention to details other people miss. That's what maintenance work teaches you. Everything important is in the small things nobody else bothers to look at." Elara's expression softened slightly. "I should succeed because I know what it's like to work hard for everything I have," Tom continued. "Nothing's been handed to me. So I won't take anything for granted, including you. And I should succeed because when things break, and things always break, I won't just complain about it or demand someone else fix it. I'll roll up my sleeves and figure out how to make it work." He paused, then added quietly, "And maybe I should succeed because you're tired of people who think they deserve you. Maybe you need someone who knows he doesn't deserve you but will spend every day trying to be worthy of the chance you gave him." The silence that followed felt different. Heavier. More real. Elara stood up and walked to the window. Tom stayed seated, unsure what to do. Had he passed? Failed? He couldn't tell. 17 princes sat in that chair, Elara said without turning around. Every one of them tried to convince me they were perfect. That they had no flaws. That I would be lucky to have them. She turned to face Tom. Not one of them was honest enough to admit weakness. Not one understood that true strength comes from knowing your limitations. She walked back and stood in front of him. Tom stood up, feeling awkward in the formal clothes he still wasn't used to. "Leadership isn't about having all the answers," Elara said. "It's about having the wisdom to seek answers. The humility to accept help. The courage to admit when you're wrong. Those princes couldn't do that. They were too proud. Too certain of their own greatness." She reached out and took both of his hands. Her skin was cooler than human skin, and her fingers were longer, but the gesture felt natural. "You passed," she said simply. Tom felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "I what?" "You passed. All 5 trials. You are the first candidate in 300 years to complete them all. But I'm just—" "You're just honest," Elara interrupted. "You're just observant. You're just willing to learn. You're just brave enough to face your fears instead of fighting them. You're just creative enough to make beauty from broken things. You're just compassionate enough to see one real person in a room full of noise." She smiled. Actually smiled. Tom realized it was the first time he'd seen her smile. "Those aren't small things, Tom. Those are exactly the things I needed." Outside the chamber, Tom could hear voices. The court would be waiting for the announcement. The nobles who'd mocked him. The advisors who'd protested his selection. The entire empire that had watched this impossible situation unfold. "They're going to lose their minds when you announce this," Tom said. "Probably," Elara agreed. "Some will protest. Some will adapt. Some will leave the court entirely. But they'll see what I saw. Someone who solves problems instead of creating them. Someone who builds instead of destroys. Someone who listens instead of demands." She squeezed his hands gently. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be exactly what you are. Can you do that?" Tom thought about his grandmother. About the long journey from Earth to this alien palace. About standing on a ladder fixing lights while princes failed tests in the same room. About every moment that had led him to this impossible place. "Yeah," he said. "I can do that." "Then let's go tell them," Elara said. She led him toward the door, toward the waiting court, toward a future neither of them could have imagined. Tom was terrified. He was exhausted. He was completely out of his depth. But he'd faced a maze, a crowd of voices, a pile of junk, and his deepest fear. He'd answered the hardest question honestly. He could face whatever came next. As they reached the door, Elara paused. "One more thing. You can call me Elara. Not Your Highness. Not Princess. Just Elara." "Okay, Elara," Tom said. She smiled again. Then she opened the door and together they stepped out to face the Empire. Sometimes you didn't need to be special. You just needed to pay attention, work hard, and be honest about who you were. And sometimes that was enough to change everything.